an Lisa Reiner und das CreativeMornings Team hier für die Einladung. Ich wurde gefragt, den Vortrag in Englisch zu halten, weil wir auch so ein paar englische Gäste da haben. Deswegen versuche ich mal mein Bestes, try my very best, and we'll switch to English to talk about this today. Graphic design, a German tradition. When Lisa asked me like half a year ago, and she came along with this list of future Creative Morning themes, and we were going through that list, and a tradition that might be the right topic, and of course it's perfect for December. And before I start talking about the actual thing, just 2 slides on myself. I'm a graphic designer myself. I studied here in Düsseldorf at the today called Behrens School of Arts, and for the past 10 years I ran a graphic design studio, and now we're doing a new studio together with Katharina and Andreas, and we do all sorts of graphic design things like branding and printed matter, books, magazines, stamps. That's sort of one side of my work. The other side is research and education. Like in the past 10, 12 years, I edited and wrote about 15 books on graphic design and graphic design history. And one of these books is Design Pioniere, or the English version is called Pioneers of German Graphic Design. And this is, I think, the most matching book to talk about when talking about tradition. To give you a better idea which period this book covers, I brought this timeline showing you the major events, eras of the first half of the 20th century in Germany. Super exciting, scary, vibrant time, 2 world wars, the change from the imperial system to the Weimar Republic, then to the Nazi regime, and then of course the post-war time. And within this historically exciting time, there's also the graphic design history dawn, the beginning of graphic design. And the first part of the book basically starts at the very roots of graphic design, like the first posters or the invention of Litfaßsäulen. And of course there's Bauhaus covered. Talk a bit about Bauhaus today, because next year we're going to celebrate 100 years of Bauhaus. You can't miss it. I just recently heard that there's even a television show, like something like Downton Abbey, but taking part at Bauhaus. No joke, it's coming. And but it's only a tiny part of the book, and it's also my book contains a lot of Bauhaus criticism, or at least criticism on Bauhaus theory or Bauhaus publications in the past years. The main focus of the book is on these 14 people. These are the pioneers of German graphic design. Each character has done significant work and created innovations. The time this morning is too short to go through all these lives. The book really goes inside the biographies and shows the sort of individual body of work, and as well the biographical facts which are strongly connected to the time history. We have people collaborating with the Nazis. We have designers who ended up dying in a concentration camp. We have people going through the resistance like John Hartfield. So it's also very exciting in terms of the history of Germany. So I picked I think 6 people and innovations to present to you today, and I think these are good examples of things developed 100 years ago and still influential today. Peter Behrens is, of course, in Düsseldorf a famous name because he was the director of the local design school right at the turn of the century. He then moved to Berlin and started working for AEG. And I brought you a little logo history of AEG. The company started shortly before the turn of the century, and the first logos they did were typically Jugendstil designs, and Peter Behrens was called to be the art director of AEG in 1907. And this is his first logo for AEG. It's still very sort of Jugendstil stylistic. And he came up with this. And then in 1908, same year, he made the first modern logo of AEG, so very geometric. And then 1912, he made this logo, and maybe this looks familiar. This was in use for over 100 years. It was just recently updated. So this is the one big thing he did. So bringing modernity to a company. But the main part beyond the logo is his overall corporate identity work. AEG and Peter Behrens were the first example of really a corporate identity, where there's not only a logo, but a corporate typeface, corporate architecture. He was the first to build flagship stores. So when you go to an Apple store today, it all started in Berlin with AEG. They set up their own stores to present the products in the way they thought they should be presented. That was in 1910, so very early on. Then a second example, that's F.H. Imke. He's famous for his book cover design. Here's an example of how book covers used to look. There's leather-bound things, you know them maybe from your shelves or from the flea market. And then the market turned, and there was a new middle class established. And of course, and suddenly books became affordable to the masses, and there was invention that we still use today is pocket books. And Imke was the first designer to really design pocket books in a series. So his invention is the way of serial design. So to use, for example, this repeating frame, to use the same typography, a color concept, changing colors for each book, and also a serial styled illustration that for bookshops became very important. Today we don't question that we see one image to illustrate a novel, for example, but that was a new thing. So when we talk about these graphic design innovations, it's always about new things coming to life that we take for granted today. Then of course posters, it's a big thing. There's many posters in the book. And that's a good example to talk about Bauhaus. That's a very famous designer, Lucian Bernhard, not connected to the Bauhaus because he worked much earlier. When Bauhaus was founded, he was already emigrated to the US. That's how posters used to look until like 1900. Very overloaded posters, lots of information, or even if there was just an image, it was a very detailed image, like on the right example. And Lucian Bernhard's innovation was reduction, a thing very much attributed to the Bauhaus. His idea was to do product posters which only had the name or logo of the product and an example of the product. For example, the Priester poster is one of his most famous works. This one was done like in 1910, 1915. It's for matchboxes, and it only shows this to matchboxes and named Priesters, and he did it for pianos and pencils and lamps and typewriters and shoes. And as you can see, for example, the Stiller poster is also very famous. That was done like 10, 15 years before the Bauhaus even started to do graphic design. So of course it has not the revolutionary power of the Bauhaus designs, the red, black and white colors, but the idea of using reduction to be more effective in terms of good communications, that's something that has been there long before the Bauhaus. And Bernhard himself, he sort of said that modern Berlin, when there was more traffic and of course more people, that was the inspiration to do the posters, because people didn't have so much time anymore, so the message had to be sent very quickly. Lucien Bernhard did many innovations. I picked another one because this is really one of my favorite examples. Maybe you've heard of the term flexible branding. That's what meant with flexible branding. You may have seen it. It's the idea that a company doesn't have only one logo, but to have many logos, or to have a flexible system. This is, for example, AOL. I think it's from 2009. Then EDP is Portugal's energy supplier, and the other example is the city of Melbourne, where they have this M with changing shapes and patterns inside. And when this came up like 10 years ago, everybody said, wow, that's revolutionary, that's like the new shit, that's the future of branding. And during my research, I found this example. It's from 1920 by Lucien Bernhard, and it's a company called GEG. It's something like a Eigenmarke, like a standard brand of supermarket. A company that had most different products, from soaps to lamps to yarns, everything. And Bernhard and his studio, they got the job to do branding for this, and said, how can we do it? Because it's like they have everything. How can we do it in only one logo? And yeah, he came up actually with the idea of doing this flexible branding thing, and there's over 40 different logo types for this company. So that shows you it's sometimes worth digging in graphic design history. This is something that has never been published in a graphic design context, and that many innovations that we celebrate as new today go actually back to like almost 100 years ago. When talking about logos, we have to talk about Karl Schulpig. He's one of my favorite design pioneers, because he's really a person that nobody actually knows. There's no books on him. Hard to find any biographical facts on this guy. But he did many famous logos. For example, the former logo of the Köln-Messe, or Die Gussa, which is still in use. He did it 100 years ago and still in use. And he did one logo that you probably all know. I brought you the original logo, Allianz Insurance Company. That was the logo they used until 1923. It's bicycle crest, and you can see the company was based in Munich and Berlin. That's why they put in the sort of symbols of the city. But a very detailed logo, and they came to Karl Schulpig in 1923 and asked him to do a new logo, and he came up with this, and that's basically the logo we know today. I think in the 1970s they put a circle around it, but it's the logo we know for Allianz Insurance. And it's, I think, a pretty perfect example of doing modern logos, because he used the eagle, but he also used the idea of protection. So he came up with the eagle host to sort of bring the company into the logo. And luckily, this is one of the examples where we have the whole process of the logo design, and that's also very exciting to see that the design process in 1923 was exactly the same way as we do branding today. He was asked by the company to do some different logos. That's on the top there. He came up with these 5 different ideas. Then they said, okay, we want to go with the eagle, and then he got into the details and finally came up with the logo. So pretty much the way we work today. And then finally, to end with, is John Hartfield and the idea of photomontage. We haven't seen in all the examples, we haven't basically seen any photography. And John Hartfield was a man who, in the 1910s, 1920s, really brought photography into graphic design. And he used the book covers of Malik Verlag, a publishing company run by his brother, doing left-wing books, to really experiment with photos and photo montages. So, of course, today we can't think of graphic design without photography. And the book covers he did, they're really super modern. I think nobody would question if you see one of these covers today in a bookstore. And yeah, that's a good example of the book. When you think of Imke and his book covers, that is only like 5 to 10 years between these 2 examples. So this very period is most significant when talking about the modernization of graphic design. Time is too short to show you more examples. I have the books here, so you can take a look. Books are available in bookstores in Düsseldorf at Walter Kühn, for example. If you're interested in more graphic design history, my books, you can follow me on Instagram, for example. And I'm also, of course, happy to answer your questions. Thank you.